You know what One Piece reminds me of? It's like a friend you had when you were younger. Somebody who you were really close to, who you always looked forward to seeing. Somebody cool and charming and fun. But as the years pass, whenever you reconnect, something just feels off. They've changed, or maybe you have, but that magical connection isn't quite there anymore. You still care about them, but you can't help but feel nostalgic for who they used to be. And that's exactly what happened for me with One Piece after the time skip. Pre-time skip One Piece just had some kind of magic that post-time skip seems to have just lost. I didn't realize it at first, it was kind of gradual, but the deeper I got into it, the more I struggled to stay invested. And when I got to Wano, I just hit a wall that I couldn't overcome. I'm not joking, I've literally tried to watch Wano 4 or 5 times by this point, and every time I just get stuck, I can't bring myself to finish it, and I end up just leaving the series again. And this is kind of bled into even when I read the manga now, where I only occasionally dip in. Now, don't get me wrong, there are still some great moments in post-time skip, but I'd be lying if I said that I feel like any of these are really on par with some of the most amazing and iconic scenes from the early series. So in this video, I'm going to break down the 3 key areas where I feel One Piece has lost its way. So what I'm going to talk about today is firstly, the crew and their dynamic with each other. Secondly, the One Piece arc formula, predictability. And third, bloated arcs and pacing issues. So let's get into it straight away with the first and the biggest point, the crew. So the biggest thing that drew me to One Piece initially wasn't the grand mysteries or even really Luffy himself, if I'm honest. It was his crew. I can't even really think if there's any other anime which have something quite the same as One Piece. How each crew member feels like such a distinct, unique person, all brought together under Luffy's banner. When Luffy recruits them, they have their own dreams, they have their own motivations. They're not just his sidekicks. They were fully realized characters on their own journeys. And this dynamic is what made some of the earlier iconic moments so exceptional. Zoro taking on Luffy's pain at Thriller Bark was the first time he placed Luffy's dream over his. Nami's breakdown in Arlong Park is the first time I actually felt like I was watching something really special. And it came after her repeatedly betraying Luffy and trying to send him away. And then we have Usopp's departure and duel with Luffy in Water 7. I think most people agree that Water 7 and Enies Lobby are one of the best art combinations in the series. Now, all these moments are really character-defining scenes that revealed core truths about who the people were and how their dynamic with Luffy shifted over the time they spent with him. How he was able to win the loyalty of these diverse group of people through his actions and his conviction. But, post-time skip, it's just really not the same. I feel like the Straw Hats have just been increasingly flanderized and reduced to their most basic traits. Sanji's character is basically just nosebleeds and being perverted now. Zoro is just a tough guy and rarely gets some of the kind of leadership moments he had pre-time skip. Usopp's growth as a brave warrior just constantly resets to highlight his cowardice. And Chopper is basically just a cute mascot now. I mean, he really got done dirty. Think about all of the post-time skip arcs and think, when was the last time we really heard about any of the crew's dreams other than Luffy? When did Nami last get excited about mapping a new island? When did Chopper actively pursue new medical knowledge? They've lost what made them special and unique. In fact, they've become background characters in what's now Luffy's story, not the story of the Straw Hats. And you know what? A big part of this problem is the expanding world and cast in the series. Because what you really have is an increasing number of characters fighting for the spotlight. So, if we look at Dressrosa, which is an arc I actually like, it's so bloated with characters other than the Straw Hats, who are the only people I actually care about and want to see. So in Dressrosa, we juggle, Law, who, okay, he's pretty cool. And then you got the Tontatta tribe. You've got the Colosseum fight, which I hated in the anime. It dragged on and on. You've got Doffy's crew. I mean, Doffy himself is cool, but then you have the Marines. You just have so many things and people going on. The crew aren't even all present at Dressrosa because they split in half, which is a trend I hate in post-time skip. It feels like the crew spend more time apart than they do together. And to an extent, I understand, because obviously you have limited pages, you have limited screen time, so somebody has to lose focus. But what I don't like is that consistently, it's been the Straw Hats, it's been Luffy's crew. And the worst arc for this is Wano. Honestly, Wano is the whole reason I made this video. I can't tell you how much I hate this arc. And I don't know if I'm in the minority here or not, but Wano is just packed with so many characters who I just do not care about. I'm sorry, I don't like the samurai, I don't like Oden. It's the biggest arc in One Piece by far, but all the time is spent in the wrong places. Especially for Zoro, I feel like, because Wano was meant to be his arc, but he barely has any spotlight. Again, the focus is just on Luffy. So let's move on to the next point now, which is formulaic storytelling. So One Piece has always kind of had this problem, but early on when everything is fresh and new and Luffy's just starting out on his journey and we don't know much about the world, I think it's all a lot less noticeable. I mean, in some ways, One Piece is a victim of its own success because it's just run for so long. But at least for me now, I really do feel like One Piece arcs just follow a rigid template that just repeats again and again with minimal variation. The One Piece arc formula is basically they arrive at an island ruled by a tyrant, they meet the oppressed locals and learn about their suffering, they form alliances with local resistance, they split the crew for parallel storylines, all the Straw Hats get matched against commanders in predictable pairings, which I'll talk about in a moment. Luffy struggles initially against the main villain and then overcomes them with a new power-up, and then they celebrate and then they move on to the next arc. Even the fights themselves have become equally predictable. Pre-Timeskip had a lot more flair and dynamism in the fights. And look, I'm not going to act like pre-Timeskip had the best fights ever in anime, but they were cool, they were impactful, and they were really engaging. And I think part of this is because pre-Timeskip, Devil Fruits were really the only power. And you had some exceptions like Enel's Mantra and CP9's extra abilities. But it led to some really fun and creative fights, like Luffy using water against Crocodile, or him just being naturally immune to Enel's lightning powers, or Nami even exploiting Caulifla's bubble powers. Haki has ended up kind of ruining all that, and I get why Oda introduced it, because Logias were just overpowered, and he needed a way for non-Devil Fruit users to be relevant. But the way it's ended up developing is just starting to feel like Dragon Ball Z, you know, where characters trade increasingly powerful attacks until somebody unleashes their ultimate technique and one-shots the enemy. Like I said, Logia Devil Fruits used to feel terrifying, but I feel like now they feel like the weakest fruit type. Even the matchups themselves are predictable. I mean, you can pretty much always guess which Straw Hat will fight with which enemy officer based solely on their hierarchy position or matching character traits. And again, this is partly due to how long One Piece has run for. Everything starts to feel the same. It's hard to keep things fresh after a couple decades. But I think undoubtedly that emphasizing Haki above everything else, you lose that creative tactical element that made some of the early battles so engaging, so much more engaging. Like, I have to take a detour here and just rant about Conqueror's Haki, which I really hate what it became, because when it was first introduced in the series, it felt, you know, like a really cool, mysterious, kind of rare power that Luffy and a few others possessed. But with what's happened after the time skip, with advanced Conqueror's Haki and it making basic attacks stronger, it's gone from a cool, unique, rare thing given to only a select few people to something that every top tier character has to have by default. I mean, Kaido has Conqueror's Haki, and don't get me wrong, you know, I know he's a Yonko, I know he owns tons of territory and stuff, but all we see of Kaido is him drinking and just being depressed. Is he really a conqueror? Maybe he was at one point, but I think it would have been interesting if maybe people could lose their ability to use it, if their mindset changes. Anyway, that's just a side rant, but let's move on to the next point. So I've kind of been saying this one throughout the script, but One Piece has simply gone on for too long with too little focus. Pre-Timeskip, arcs felt more focused and more intimate, but post-Timeskip they're just horrendously bloated. Again, Wano is a good example of this. It's a monstrous runtime with so many characters packed in. Did it really need to be that long? You know what, I don't think I'm ever going to finish Wano. Seriously, I think whenever I muster up the energy to go back to One Piece, I'm just going to skip over it and move straight to Egghead. To be fair, the anime does magnify these issues a lot. Episodes increasingly adapt less and less manga material, padding the runtime with repeated reaction shots, reused animations, extended power-up sequences, I mean, I know a lot of people now are just switching over to One Piece to get a better viewing experience. But even though it's not as bad in the manga, I still think the bloat really affects and dilutes the impact of what should be the major moments. When an arc stretches over 3 or 4 real-world years, it just becomes fatiguing. It becomes impossible to maintain the emotional momentum. So, where does that leave us overall with One Piece? One Piece is still one of, if not the most popular animes in the world. But at least for me, I really hope that Oda seriously starts to think about wrapping up his story. Or at least thinking back to what it was that made early One Piece such a massive hit. I might be alone in this, but I can't help but feel nostalgic for what's been lost. Pre-timeskip One Piece had some kind of magic that's just become increasingly diluted. A perfect balance of heart, adventure, crew dynamics, and narrative focus that made it truly special. I really feel like One Piece has just lost sight of what made the journey so special. The Straw Hat crew and their bonds with each other. I do feel like we're getting into the endgame of One Piece, and the conclusion probably isn't too far away, but I really hope we see a return to these fundamental strengths. The Straw Hats meaningfully interacting as a crew again. Battles won through creativity rather than superior haki. Characters growing not just in power, but as people. And the individual dreams and motivations of the crew becoming important and relevant to the story again. I don't know, what do you all think? Has One Piece lost something special after the time skip? Or am I simply being a grumpy old timer? Let me know in the comments below what you think. And that's the video for today. I hope you all enjoyed it. Leave a comment to let me know what you think, and if you want to see more videos just like this, please do like and subscribe, and check out the other videos linked on the screen now. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all next time.